Playing fast tempos is always a huge challenge on guitar. And technique is probably the first thing that hits you as impossible to master. But maybe that's not even the biggest problem, and you can get a lot out of changing how you think to get better at up-tempo playing. I managed to run into probably every possible problem when I took a deep dive into getting better at playing faster and improving my technique, which is sort of how this started. When I was in the 4th year of my conservatory study, I decided that I really wanted to get better at playing faster tempos and faster lines, and I set up a practice routine to help me improve that. My inspiration for this approach was maybe less than obvious, since it was inspired by a video clip that a student of mine had shared with me. Essentially, what John Petrucci is doing is taking a simple exercise and then speeding it up from very slow to as fast as you can play it. And that process I took to my own exercises and repeated every day while slowly improving bit by bit. The way I did it was to take scale positions, but of course you can also start by working on smaller fragments and then expand on those to make them longer exercises. And I wasn't only doing just the scales, I also worked on speeding up other exercises in the scales like intervals, triads, diatonic arpeggios, because that's the stuff that I wanted to play. Since I was focused on alternate picking, I was also practicing some Steve Morse-inspired exercises, which I really enjoyed and actually still work on. I have some old videos with those if you want to check those out. The most important part of this is to be precise. The most important part of this is to be precise when you play slow so that your technique doesn't fall apart when you start speeding it up. Something I still have to remind myself of all the time and frequently get confronted with when I record myself improvising. This really helped me develop my alternate picking, and after some time I could play a lot of stuff pretty fast. But I also quickly started to realize that other problems were starting to turn up and that I needed to address those to play better up-tempo solos. One thing that I discovered once I was able to play the exercises fast was that it didn't immediately translate to being able to play solos. I needed to start developing more vocabulary that was usable in higher tempos, which means more efficient, more eighth note bass, and without any triplet or 16-note passages in the middle that I cannot play if I speed it up. This reminded me of something one of my teachers in Denmark, Bjarne Rupe, had taught me about not playing too slow. If you want to get better at playing fast and develop your ability to go through the changes, then you should practice in a medium tempo where you can easily play the lines and still have some freedom to improvise. But you should not play so slow that you start doing double time or triplets. Instead, you want to be disciplined and keep in mind that you need to be able to play this faster while you're practicing so that you become more free and develop more vocabulary. On a side note, the lesson where he gave me this advice was when I brought in Moment's Notice, because my combo teacher at the time had decided that since we could almost make it through a medium tempo Just Friends, then that Coltrane tune was a logical next step. Finding the right medium practice tempo and then working on playing like that is a great way to develop your playing, and it also enables you to sometimes try to practice soloing on a song similar to how I was practicing technique, so gradually speeding things up. If you start working on this, then I can also very much recommend learning to play towards target notes, which will help you manage another thing that's incredibly important for faster tempos. Another thing that can get very stressful in higher tempos is the tempo itself. You start playing the song, but it seems like you're in hyperspace and there are 170 chords every second. Coupled with that, you're trying to feel the beat and stomping your foot 250 times per minute for the entire 12 minutes of the song, and your foot is getting tired. In fact, your leg feels like it's going to fall off. Relax. You're in a garden, the sun is shining, and it's a medium blues in F. Instead of doing this, you need to start feeling the tempo slower, which is also what I've heard from a lot of teachers, like Barry Harris or one of my guitar teachers at the conservatory, Ave Albers. Depending on what you find easier, then it makes sense to start feeling either half the tempo or a quarter of the tempo. So just the half notes, or even just feel a bar as a beat. That way you make sure that you don't have to spend energy on counting and tapping your foot. At tempos like this, then the beat becomes a subdivision and you want to feel it like that as well. Also because it makes you a lot more flexible in terms of playing quarter note triplets or just floating on top of the groove without getting lost. But of course, you also want to not get stressed by the changes as well. It's very important that you're thinking about where the music is going and that you are ahead of where it is now so that you're not falling behind. You don't really have time to think about what scale or arpeggio to play on the chord that's happening now, because then you're going to be too late. This means that you need to really know the song and you need to be aware of what the next chord will be. If you want to test that, then just put on giant steps and try to say the chords as they're played.
E flat, A, D, G, B flat, E flat, G flat, B, F, B flat, E flat, A, D, G, C sharp, F sharp, B, F, B flat, E flat, C sharp, F sharp, B, D, G, B flat, E flat.
And when I'm doing this, then I need to think about the chords in that tempo, and that is just too fast. It needs to be already in your system so that you can improvise over it. And the way you probably do that is to play chunks that you can connect together, which is also clearly how Coltrane's solo on this works. Whether putting together phrases like this is actually improvising is sometimes up for discussion. I remember seeing a Twitter thread from Ethan Iverson about this a few weeks ago. If you're on Twitter, you should consider following him because he posts some really interesting observations here and there. If you're used to playing towards target notes, then this is really a huge help here because you're naturally training to think about the next chord and you're less likely to get stuck with a chord where you have to think about what to play. As I said, in this tempo, that is always too late. While I was getting better and better at playing lines with alternate picking, I started to notice that I was not really happy with how my phrasing sounded. Everything was clear and articulated, but it was lacking some dynamics within the lines. I missed hearing some notes pop out of the lines, and it took quite some time for me to figure out what was really going on. I was also checking out a lot of Wes Montgomery and Scofield solos at the time, and I started to notice that they both used a lot of legato in their playing. This was not only to be able to play faster phrases, even if that was definitely a part of the reason, it was also something that was just a part of the phrasing, so a part of how their lines sounded. I wanted to get more of that into my playing, and I realized that I needed to focus less on only using alternate picking all the time. The way I've mostly approached this has been about listening to how I hear a phrase and then trying to play it with a technique that gives me that sound. For example, if you listen to this phrase and compare that to this, you can hear that even if I make the G very soft with alternate picking, then it's a different sound compared to playing it with a pull-off. Because the difference is not only volume, it's also the attack and the quality of the tone. And a bonus is that playing the phrase using the pull-off makes it a lot easier for your right hand. This combination of phrasing and technique can be a bit of a puzzle, but it's both effective and for me sounds much closer to what I want it to sound like. Another thing that can make your life a lot easier when it comes to working with up-tempo songs is to really understand the chord progression and be able to make it a bit simpler. You can learn that by checking out this video.